Entrepreneurship is one big experiment. The faster we realize it, the faster we grow. If we're afraid to try, if we're afraid to test, afraid to make mistakes, we won't know. It's as simple as that. This episode is how to experiment with purpose. Welcome to Market Like a Parent and Parent Like a Marketer. I'm Danielle Weil, founder of DW Copy and creator of LaunchFlow. I've got 4 kids. I live on a kibbutz in Israel, and I help business owners launch with confidence, make more money with their words, to the tune of over $100 million in sales for my clients. One of my favorite things to do is helping small business owners and solopreneurs embrace marketing, learn to love it, find their flow when it comes to the way they market their business. And I wanted to help you realize that if you are a parent and an entrepreneur, you already have the skills to be a great marketer because you are using them in your parenting with your kids. And that's what this podcast is all about. The connections between marketing and parenting, how we can use our parenting skills to be better marketers, and how we can use our marketing skills to be better parents. So today we are going to explore head bumps and A/B testing. Now, when my oldest daughter was learning how to crawl, I remember being on a FaceTime video call with my grandmother, showing off the baby. Look, she's so cute. And I remember on the call, my daughter crawled into the corner of the coffee table and bumped her head. And, she was upset for a minute. It wasn't a really hard bump. She bumped it a little bit and she was fine. She kept going. And my grandmother says to me, "Aren't you going to put baby bumpers on that table? I'll send you some." And I said, "No, I'm not. How is she going to learn not to bump her head on the table if I do that?" Now, obviously, we childproof the important things. We have childproof the outlets, the stove, etc. But I was not putting bumpers on my coffee table. I wouldn't even know where to buy them in Israel. I don't know if they sell them here, if it's a thing. The average Israeli would have laughed in my face at the idea of coffee table bumpers. How else are they going to learn if they don't bump their heads? How will they ride a bike if they don't fall a few times? Failure is an essential part of the process. And it's true, the lessons that we learn the hardest are the ones that we learn the hard way. And it's true, the lessons we learn the hardest are the ones we learn the hard way. They're not mistakes, they're lessons. Now, obviously, as parents, we want to protect our kids from every bad thing that could ever possibly happen to them, which is counterintuitive to what they actually need to be independent, confident humans. We need to let them make their own mistakes, take responsibility, learn from those mistakes, and get better. I remember we were visiting the States. We were visiting a friend of the family that's a preschool teacher, and she explained to us that they do not have swing sets on the playground anymore. And we said, why? Why are there no more swings? Because they're afraid of lawsuits, because they're too dangerous. And I remember my jaw dropping. No swing sets on the playground? Swings are too dangerous? Really? Now contrast that to the preschool on the kibbutz where I live, which has something called a junkyard. It is literally called a junkyard. And the junkyard is their backyard play area. It is full of junk, exactly like it says. It's full of old rotary phones that people have thrown away, pots and pans, old car seats, old strollers. There's even an old jet ski that somebody brought once. There's a really old car that has been stripped and painted, and the kids use it as a jungle gym. And there's no concern of, oh, someone might sue us for this, or, oh, it might be too dangerous. Nope. Those kids are playing with old cars and jet skis. I actually was like, really? When I first saw it, when I first moved there and saw what their playground looked like. But now I think it's cool. My kids walk to school. There's one street that they have to cross. The guard looks after them. I remember being driven to school by my parents. I remember my siblings taking the bus. Now, I am sure that in some places it's still possible to walk to school. I am sure that in some places it's still possible for kids to wander around. But it happens a lot less. We're afraid to give our kids more freedom, even though we know that's what they need. My teenager now takes public transportation, takes herself to her own appointments. She misses the bus. She's the one that has to figure it out. She has the space to make mistakes. And the earlier we let our kids make mistakes and figure it out, the more we let them try, the more confident they are. The more likely they are to try the next thing and the next thing, right? We want them to be financially responsible. When do you start giving your kids an allowance? When do you start letting them handle money? When do you start letting them go into the store and buy things? Our little kids don't actually need money in order to buy things at our grocery store because it's all on credit. Everybody has a 3-digit number. You say the number and it just goes on our account. And the kids go by themselves to the grocery store. They buy their groceries. They buy their weekly treat. They stop in before and after school with their friends. And they just put it on the tab. Now, sometimes they buy things they're not supposed to buy, and we have to hear about it with a phone call from the person who runs the grocery store saying, hey, did you know that your kid was in here buying XYZ? Come look at the receipt. And then we have to have a very stern talk with them about what they can and cannot purchase and the value of money. And then they have to pay back what they owe with what they bought. We've had 2 situations like that already, maybe more than 2. But they're independent. They can go in and choose and shop, and they know how much things cost, and that's how they learn. So many of us as kids were criticized when we made mistakes. If you were ever put down as a kid for making mistakes or rewarded when you did things right, like, yay, you got an A on the test, that's so awesome, or what a beautiful picture, you might have some fear around letting your kids maybe have more independence. And if you're not familiar with the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, highly recommend it because this book changed my outlook on so many things. Essentially, read the book, but it describes this idea of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. Fixed mindset being the idea that our traits are fixed, who we are. We are smart. We are outgoing. We are thoughtful. We are a good reader, an artist, great at math. We are all of these things, and those things don't change. And once we are those things, once we are a straight A student, if suddenly we are not a straight A student and we bring home a B, then we are no longer ourselves. There's a disappointment. Who am I now if I'm not an A student because I didn't bring home an A? And what that creates is that creates a bar, expectations for us all the time for us to be who we've been labeled as in order to maintain our confidence and our self-esteem. That's the fixed mindset. And that's what a lot of us, I think, got as kids. We got, oh, you're so great at this, or, oh, that's so awesome. And we got a lot of praise, which our parents thought they were doing the right thing when they praised us for our achievements. It's great, but it also created expectations. So if you're a high achiever like me, realizing where a lot of this stuff came from is really important. Now, in contrast to that is the growth mindset, is the idea that our traits are not fixed. Who we are is infinitely changeable and moldable. Growth mindset is all about learning from mistakes. Our mistakes don't define who we are. It's the effort that we put in. So why are we still so afraid to make mistakes in our business? I'd argue that the more okay you are with quote unquote making mistakes, the more capacity you have to be in that growth mindset. Think about it. Let's say you're launching a new offer and you want to test out which marketing angle or hook is going to perform best in paid ads on Facebook, on Instagram, on Google. The faster you can pay for ads to get data and see what works and what doesn't, the faster you can lean into what does work, scale up those winners, and get a return on your ad spend and start making sales. Good marketers are constantly and methodically A/B testing and tracking. It's the scientific method for business, right? Create a hypothesis. I think XYZ, isolate the variable, design the experiment, run the test, learn from the results, and then use that data to run another test, right? In other words, bump your head enough and you will figure out how to navigate around the coffee table. No bumpers needed. Lean into it and you'll learn even faster. Jeff Bezos started selling Amazon books from his garage. The Airbnb guys rented out air mattresses in their apartment. The founder of Canva started with a simple yearbook tool that then turned into the Canva we know and love. Amy Porterfield, Pat Flynn, Neil Patel all launched imperfectly and learned really fast from that data. And I'm sure there are so many more examples. Maybe you can even think of them. Maybe you are one. Hopefully you are. And if you agree with this in theory, but are having trouble doing it in practice, you might need to do some work around that fear of failure, that growth mindset. What is the worst that's going to happen? The absolute worst if I fail. What is failure? Failure is learning. And obviously, it's much easier to say this than it is to do it in practice. Doing new stuff is scary. I've had to let go of a lot of this. And we're especially hard on ourselves about our mistakes. We take them personally. We let it affect our self-esteem and our self-worth, especially if you grew up with a fixed mindset parent and you had standards that you had to achieve. You had to bring a certain level of achievement in order to be rewarded, in order to receive praise. So let's talk about how we can both raise growth mindset-oriented kids and adopt that growth mindset ourselves to actually grow our business faster. So first, praise and reward effort, not results, right? So if your kid comes with a grade on a test and you know that they studied hard for that test, say, oh, I saw that you studied so hard for this test. How do you feel about the results? So we're not putting judgment on whether it's good or bad. We are letting them take ownership of the fact that they studied really hard and that they are allowed to be proud of their results. And then only once they are proud of it, then we can give them the reinforcement. And in your business, I like to tell my clients to plan and reward themselves after they do a launch or a promotion or they do anything new, no matter how it goes. You get the reward just for doing the big scary thing. And that reward actually creates positive reinforcement pathways around said scary thing, which means that you're more likely to do it again, right? I have seen time and time again the clients that I coach through their launches do the launch, do the thing, put so much energy and effort into the launch. They put their all into it. And I say, so what's happening after the launch? What do you get for doing this launch? Usually they're happy with the result, but even if not, if it doesn't go as they planned, well, how are you going to reward yourself? And it's this fixed mindset of but it didn't go as I planned. I still get a reward. Do I deserve a reward? Of course you deserve a reward. You put in a lot of hard work around this. You put yourself out there in a way that was new for you and maybe difficult and hard for you. You did the thing. You deserve the reward. And the more that we can integrate that into our thinking, that it is the effort that deserves the reward and not the achievement, the more capacity we have to accept when things don't go the way we want them to go, and to clear the emotional baggage that comes with that so-called failure. Always be testing something. There's a concept in direct marketing about trying to beat the control, meaning you're always trying to improve on your best performer. Now, in olden days, when things were being tested in direct mail packages through the mail, meaning sending postage, sending an envelope with postage cost money. It cost money to send that envelope. It cost a certain amount. And that was the price you paid to get the results. But there would always be a test, a variable to try to beat that control. Can we get better results from this new angle, from this new test? Will it beat the thing that we know is working best right now? You're always trying to improve on your best performer. You're always trying to beat the control. So you're out there as a business owner, constantly trying to find the thing. And sometimes it is 1% better, 2% better, 10% better, 40% better is huge. I remember once drafting a new page for a product that, when we tested it one against the other, improved sales by 43% over what they currently had. That's huge. Imagine making 43% more sales just by changing the words on your page. Now, I remember when I was working at a company that sold a diet plan through a very long video sales letter. This is a 40-minute video presentation that sold a $49 membership, I believe was the offer. There was an entire marketing team dedicated to testing new things on the first 5 seconds of that video. We have an entire 40-minute video, but the highest leverage thing to test was the first 5 seconds. So it's really important to know what to test, where your biggest leverage points are. And if you're wondering what's an important thing for me to test, think about the 80-20 rule. Think about what is the 20%. In this case, it was the first 5 seconds that is going to get you 80% of the results. Within the first 5 seconds, a huge percentage of people will drop off. And then the curve stays relatively steady throughout. So if you can capture more people in the first 5 seconds, you increase the amount of people that stay all the way through. So that is a key leverage point. That's why there was so much time and energy and resources spent on finding new angles, new ideas, new hooks that would beat the current control that we had. So thinking about, what do I test? Where are my leverage points? How can I test screams and not whispers? How can I make mistakes quickly and learn from them and get lessons from them so that I can find the winners? Worst case scenario, it doesn't work. You bumped your head. And now you know that the table quarter is pretty sharp. But hey, you can crawl. Now, we want to let our kids make mistakes too. And it's intuitive when you think about it. It goes against our instincts as parents to want to protect them and keep them safe. It takes work to let them go. You have a kid going off to college, you have a kid going off for their first day of school. Those are big moments. Those are moments of release, of trust, of knowing that they are going to make mistakes and we cannot keep them from making mistakes. But if we keep in mind that growth mindset, that if we have taught them well they will learn from those mistakes, then we have to. We have no choice. We know it's the best thing for them. It's the same thing in your business. We can't be so afraid to fail that we never try. So what are you going to try? What are you going to test? How quickly are you willing to fail in order to get to the winners? That's what I want to leave you with today. Until next time, I'm Danielle Weil. Let's go out there and market like a parent and parent like a marketer.